So this is some of the aquamarine that I got out of Brazil many years ago on a buying trip down there. I bought too much, and I still have a lot left of aquamarine. It's good. This is a wonderful, aquamarine is just a wonderful stone to cut and polish. This piece of aquamarine is from a lot or parcel of over 5,000 carats, which I bought on a gem hunting trip down in Brazil many years ago. This piece weighs in at just over 20 carats, but notice that although it's wide, a wide piece of rough, this rough is a bit on the thin or shallow side. My recommendation for new cutters is to buy individual pieces of rough and to not buy large parcels of gem rough. So let me put this piece of aquamarine into my refractol. Refractol has about the same refractive index as quartz, and although aquamarine is not quartz, it's close enough, and the refractol will allow us to see into our piece of aquamarine. And I can see that this piece of rough, although it's fairly clean, it does have some internal inclusions, some internal issues. And I expect to get a nice gemstone out of this rough, but it will not be internally flawless. Okay, before I try to melt my aquamarine onto a dop, I need a flat spot to glue the stone to the dop. So I use a 320 grit topper. It's rough enough to leave scratches that'll help the bonding where the super glue touches the dop. And what I'm going to do is grind a flat spot like that. And so I just grind it by hand, get a drip of water going. Identify where we want to put the flat spot, and okay, so that still has some indentations there. I'm going to go ahead and grind through that to get a flat spot. Sometimes in the past I've figured I could leave that and not worry about it when I get to the table, but in those cases what always happens is you have just enough space for the table, for the crown, and you have that indentation there and it causes you a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to grind until that is flat. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use to glue my dop to my stone. As I said earlier, this piece of rough is on the thin side, so I need a design for a thin gemstone. And as I was looking through the facetdiagram.org website, I found this design called Shallow Pavilion. This gem fasting diagram was created by Long and Steele. I have cut designs by Long and Steele before, and they've all turned out great. They do a great job of designing gem faceting diagrams. So I'm confident this design will result in an awesome gemstone. Note in the size data that the P/W ratio is 0.435. The P/W ratio is the pavilion to width ratio. The pavilion is the bottom part of the gemstone, and a ratio of 0.435 is shallow, so that gives us this shallow pavilion, and that will work great for our rough. However, also note that the upper part of the gemstone, called the crown, that there's no table in this particular design. They made it that way, and that's fine. But I personally would prefer a table on my gemstone. So I'm going to use the Gem Cut Studio or GCS software to modify this design based on my personal preference to have a table. All right, So there's nothing wrong with this design, this shallow pavilion design at all. It's a wonderful design. But for me, I want to have a table on top of this stone. So I'm going to use Gem Cut Studio, GCS, and how I've learned to use GCS and cut and change the design so that I have a table. Now I've prepared a number of videos as I taught myself GCS. I prepared a number of videos on how to use GCS, so if you're interested in learning, you can follow my tutorials. So I won't go into depth detail on what I'm doing here, but what I'm going to do is change the angle of these facets and then put a table on it. So these facets are the C6 and they're cut at a 6-degree angle, which I don't want to cut at a 6-degree angle with my Ultratech. I want a little bit steeper of an angle. So I'm going to edit that tier and cut them at a 15-degree angle. It looks like the design's messed up, but it's not. You just can slide it up and jump, and there. My new angle's 15-degree and cutting the C6 line of instruction. So I'll cut that. And now to cut the table, I simply put 0 degrees for my table, and I'll just jump, okay, and move it back up. And you see those previous facets now become kind of a frame, like a picture frame for my table, which I kind of like. I like that frame on the table. And there'll be no meet points for the table, so you just cut it to where you think it looks good and you're done. So I'll cut that. This is my new design, slightly modified shallow pavilion, I think, and it's just because I want a table on it. Again, nothing wrong with the design, it's wonderful. Here is the modified design after I made the changes in GCS. Again, I personally like a table, and I really like designs where the table is framed, like a picture frame. So just a personal preference, and not a thing wrong with the original design. Okay, for our Aquamarine, we want to put the stone in our Ultratech. It's a cushion cut, so we want the 96, 24, 72, and the 48. To kind of correspond with our stone to make it a kind of a square. So we put it in like that, tighten up the set screw, and we're ready to start cutting our Aquamarine. Okay, now that I've finished preforming the first P1 row on the pavilion, I've got to bring it down a little bit more to get rid of this part here, but we're pretty well set on our P1. So now we're going to change the instructions and go cut the girdle. Now, since this is a shallow piece of rough, this shallow pavilion really helps out. So what we need to do when we cut the girdle, right now the girdle is about the width of the stone is about 14.5 millimeters wide, and there's not enough space to cut the crown. So you go to your instructions and you look for this crown to width ratio, the C/W, which is given to you in the diagram of the cutting instructions, and that's 0.18. So if you were to have a 14.5 wide stone, you would need 2.6 millimeters, which is 14.5 times your C/W of 1.8, and plus a little bit for the girdles. You need about 3 millimeters of space to cut the upper half of the stone, the crown. So we don't have that, so we need to bring it in. So 3 millimeters would look about like that. So that's how much I need the girdle to be. So I just bring the stone in until I have about 3 millimeters as I cut the girdle, and then we're pretty close to preform. So I made a mark with my Sharpie right where I need my 3mm mark, about there in the center. Don't worry about the sides because there's going to be another set of girdle facets that take care of the sides. But as long as I have 3mm here, I have about enough space to cut the crown. So instead of a 14.5 millimeter wide stone, it's down to a little less than 11.5 millimeters. And I may lose a little bit more because I do have to bring the Pavilion down a little bit more right here to get rid of this problem from the rough. And if I had been buying this individual piece of rough today, I probably wouldn't have bought it, but I bought it when I was brand new, and I bought it down in Brazil when I purchased a lot, parcel over 5,000 carats. So there was many pieces of rough in there, many good ones and a few that need a lot of work. But for a new cutter, I would not buy parcels. I'd buy individual stones. And here I am a decade later, more than a decade later, still working on my rough that I had purchased. So there's no need for a new cutter to buy that much rough. So now I'll go over this again with my 600 grit lap. I'll bring the Pavilion down to where I have a permanent center point. Bring the girdle in to where I have enough space to cut the crown, and we'll be well preformed and ready to do our final cutting and preforming, pre-polishing. I finished polishing the bottom half of our Aquamarine with the creamway lap from Gear Loose with cerium oxide spray. So now I'll transfer our stone and cut the upper half of our design. I've preformed our Aquamarine with 600 grit topper. So now I'll go to the 12M, tighten up the facets a little bit, and the Aquamarine's coming along very nicely. Okay, I finished polishing the upper half of our Aquamarine, and now I'm going to deviate from the design and use my modified design and cut a table instead of these, and then the table will be kind of framed. So let me put my stone in the table adapter and so I can cut the table. Okay, and to set our stone up to cut the table for the Ultratech, you put the Ultratech at a 45-degree angle and you use your tabling adapter kit. This is just like, it simulates a DOP. It makes sure that you're level, not off on either side. So you slide that into the tabling adapter. And it's got 2 set screws. You just tighten up the set screws. And then you can remove this piece and put your DOP with your stone in. And it has another set screw. You just tighten that up. And you're ready to cut your table. Okay, I finished polishing the table. It polished right up. I started with a 12M and then went to a 8,000 grit diamond on a zinc lap, and then I polished it with my creamway lap with cerium oxide spray. So now we'll take our stone, soak it in the acetone to remove the super glue, weigh it, measure it, and send it off to BOPIE. Today I cut a piece of Aquamarine, which I had bought in Brazil quite a while ago. The rough was a bit on the thin or shallow side, so I found and used a design called Shallow Pavilion. I also used my GCS software to modify the original design because I wanted to make a table and to put a frame around the table. And again, the original design is perfectly fine. I only modified it because of my personal preference to have a table. I like this design, and I'll I expect that I will use this design again whenever I come across a piece of rough that'll work with a cushion shape or square, and that's a bit on the thin side. In my opinion, this design is suitable for any cutter. I don't think a brand new cutter would have a problem with this design, so I'd recommend you give this design a try. And if you do try out this design, please let me know how it turns out for you. Also, let me know in the comments what you think of the design and of the aquamarine that I cut using this design. And as always, happy fasting, everyone.